Hello and welcome to part 12 of Let's Create a 2D Platformer in the Godot game engine. My name is Colin, and in this tutorial, not so mini series, we're creating this 2D platformer video game. Of course, in this game, you control the player on screen using keys on your keyboard. Of course, you can walk, run, jump, and fall. You can collect coins, squash enemies, get hit by enemies and lose lives, shoot fireballs. You know how 2D platformer games work. So as it stands in our project right now, we have a character that can explore a large world, and as of the last two videos in this mini-series, we have coins in our game level. So now if you collect a coin, if your character collides with a coin, that coin does a little bounce animation, the coin will disappear, and you will collect a coin. Your character keeps track of how many coins you've collected, and if you collect all the coins in your game level, or the number of coins that you specify as the programmer of your game will switch scenes to perhaps a you win screen. In our case right now, we're just switching back to our game level. We're resetting our game back to the beginning. But you might have noticed that on the screen right now, there is something extra. There is a coin counter on the screen that is basically sticking to the glass as my game camera moves, which follows my character around. This coin counter is called a heads-up display. A heads-up display, or a HUD for short in a game, is information that sticks to the game camera that follows your view around, that gives you more information. And in this case, of course, it's a coin counter, so that's what we'll be making in this video. Of course, if you have not seen the last 11 parts of this mini-series and how to create a 2D platformer in the Godot game engine, I'll put a link to this whole playlist containing all of my Godot 3 tutorials up on the screen right now. So click that card if you haven't seen any of these past videos, and check them out. But let's go ahead and jump into the Godot game engine. Of course, if you like this video or if you learned something in it, please go ahead and click on that like button below this video. It really helps out me and my channel. And if you want to see more videos like this one in the Godot game engine or in Blender or other technology, click on that subscribe button as well, and click the bell icon to be notified whenever I upload a new tutorial. So as it stands in our project right now, we have a little game character that can explore our world. I'll go ahead and press the play seed button to test it out at the start of this tutorial. So right now, if I move my character around and I jump and I collect the coins, what's happening right now is that my character is the object that's keeping track of how many coins have been collected. And so you can't see visually how many coins have been collected, so you can't really track your own progress. So let's fix that. Let's add a HUD. To add a HUD into your game, something that sticks to your camera's glass essentially, you're going to be adding what's called a CanvasLayer node. So I'm going to select the root node of my scene. And again, this node, a CanvasLayer, kind of acts in a funny way. It doesn't stay with the other objects visually in your screen. It's a CanvasLayer, which means that it is kind of separate from everything else in that it will not move as your camera pans around. It'll basically, again, stick to the glass of your camera. So with the root node of this level selected, I'm going to press the plus button, and I'm going to add what's called a CanvasLayer node. And I have to search for that all in one word, CanvasLayer. And it's right there. So I'll double click on this CanvasLayer node to add it into my node tree. There it is. I'm going to double click on this and name it HUD, H-U-D, all in capital letters. That'll come into play a little bit later. And I'm going to select this node because to it, I'm going to add a child node that's of a certain category that works really well with these CanvasLayer nodes. The category, so I'll select it. The category is, I'm going to clear my search out, called a control node. And this is kind of the parent node of a whole sub-branch of nodes, a category of nodes. These are all user interface nodes that work well with these CanvasLayers. These user interface nodes are all green, so they're easy to find. And the one that we're going to add is just going to add an area onto our screen that kind of forms the area where the user can look to see the coin counter on screen. So this is called a panel. In fact, it's right here. If you need to search for this, P-A-N-E-L, you can do that. I'll double click. And as you can see, if I zoom in on the kind of origin of my scene, a panel is just by default a black rectangle or square. I can drag the corners to make it bigger, but what I'm going to do is select this panel node. I'll pan over in my scene, and I'm going to go over to the inspector with it selected over here, and I'm going to give it a custom style. So I'm going to expand out this custom style kind of section, and we're going to give it a custom style called, I'll click this little arrow, called a style box flat. This is one of the ways you can style things in Godot, especially user interface elements. There's also themes, which is more versatile. I'm not going to get into that though, at least not in this video. So custom style and new style box flat. When we make this panel have a style box flat style, I can click right on that word, style box flat, and it'll expand out this subsection so I can edit the properties of this style box flat. And I can choose a background color. So I'm going to give it, at least for now, a black background, but I'm going to turn down the alpha, the transparency slider, so it is now see-through, and that's kind of nice. I'm going to expand out the corner radius section because I want to give this section kind of nice round corners. So I'll click in each one of these top left and type 20. I'll press tab 20, tab 20, tab 20. And now if I press enter, all the corners have nice rounded corners. So where should I put this panel? Well, we're not going to position this panel in relation to our game's camera. In fact, we want to, when we make a canvas layer, position any UI elements that are part of our HUD in relation to our default game window rectangle, which is right here on your screen. I'm highlighting it with extra UI elements in the video right now so you can see it, but it's not as obvious in the Godot engine. So in relation to this rectangle, we're going to position our panel right about there. Okay, maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger. Now in this section, I'm going to have a little coin icon, and then we'll have a letter X just to mean times, and then we'll have a number that says how many coins we've collected. To get that coin icon and to use fonts in our game, we need external assets, which I'll be giving to you in a download link below this video on YouTube. I've got two folders here, HUD and fonts. And so what I'm going to do is select them. And of course, when you download these, you might need to unzip them, and then you're going to want to copy them. So I'll right click on them and say copy. I'll go into my game project folder. Of course, I have an assets folder here. I'll go into that, and I will. In fact, I already have a fonts folder, which I will delete. I will paste those fonts and the HUD. I'm giving you a font. It's called Balsamic Sans, and this is the bold variant of it. You can get this font from Google Fonts, and if you go to Google Fonts, which is fonts.google.com, and if you search for Balsamic Sans, you can click the download button to get all of the variations of this font for yourself. I'm just giving you the bold version. Now, when you're making a game and you're going to eventually export it and distribute it on the internet, or you want people to download it and install it, you have to include the fonts yourself. You can't rely on somebody else having the exact fonts that you want to have in your game already installed on their computer. You have to put the fonts in your game project folder. Okay, that's why I'm giving you these fonts, or this font, at least for this part of our game project. In the HUD folder, I'm giving you the picture of the coin that we're going to be adding into our HUD. Okay, it looks different than the coin in our level, so the user doesn't get confused on their screen. So there you go. We've got two new folders. I'm going to go back into the Godot game engine, and it'll quickly import those things. So down in my file system doc in the assets folder, I've got the HUD folder with the coin and the fonts. So now we're going to add the picture of the coin to our HUD panel. So I'm going to select the HUD root node, and I'm going to press the plus button. We're going to add not a sprite. You might be expecting that because a sprite is how we normally add a picture into our game. We're going to instead use one of those green control based nodes. We're going to use the texture rectangle. In fact, if I search for text, sure, if I click on the search and actually type that, texture rect, that's what we want, texture rectangle. It behaves a little bit differently and it works well with canvas layers. So I'll double click on that and it gets put right here. It's a rectangle that can have a texture in it. It has a spot for a picture. So I'm going to go to my file system doc, and I'm going to go to my HUD assets folder and drag that picture in to the empty texture. There it is. You'll notice that if I try scaling this texture rectangle, it doesn't do a whole lot because I have to select and turn on that texture rectangle's expand property, and then I can squash and stretch. And you might have to play around with this scale on expand because you might not be able to make it smaller in some cases. I'm not sure. I'm just going to kind of position it like that. Let's just kind of move it around a little bit and make it kind of nice. I believe if you hold Shift, it should not stretch it if you do that when you first start stretching it around. Okay, so that's how our HUD looks right now. It looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and select the root node, and I'm going to press plus because now we're going to add a little X. And this is the first time we're going to be using a font in our game, but to add an X, which is just text, we're going to be adding what's called a label node. So I'll select label. I can of course search for label in my search bar. I'll double click on it. It is right up here. I'll drag it to right about there. When you have a label node selected, you can type in its text property box in the inspector. I'm going to type the letter lowercase x. And if I zoom in, because that's what it's going to take to see it, it is white in color or light gray, and it is really small, and it does not use a font. How you get fonts into labels in Godot is you have to select the label, and then you can go down to, there's lots of properties in the inspector for labels. You have to go down to custom fonts, and this custom font is actually not where you're going to drag in the font file. It's a .ttf font file. If you drag that in there, it won't work. What you have to do is create a Godot resource. So what we're going to be doing here is next to empty, I'm going to say, click on the little arrow and say new dynamic font. And once I do that, this is a Godot resource that you're going to bring a font file into. So if I click on the word dynamic font, it'll expand out a section just like before. And with this section expanded, now I can open up the font section and drag in the font data, which is actually going to be our font file. I'll drag and let go. So now we're using this font called Balsamic Sans. It's too small. So under this dynamic font resource, there is a settings category. This is where we change the size of the font. So I might try something like 40, maybe something bigger like 52. I don't know. You can play around with that, and I'll move it up. So now I have coins, times, and the font color is a little bit below that section. So if I collapse dynamic font, there's a custom color section where I can enable font color. And so what I'm going to do is try to pick with the color picker a color that looks a lot like that gold color of the coin. So I like that. I'll just click somewhere else. Let's go ahead and create the actual text for the number of coins that we've collected. So again, I'm going to, before I actually add that, I'm going to make this label called X. I'll just rename it X and press enter. I'm going to select the HUD again. I'll press plus. You know what's happening here. I'm going to find the label. I'm going to double click on it, and I'm going to move it over here. I'm going to add, instead of a number, I'm going to add 2 pound signs or hashtags so I can get an idea of how big this item, this text should be, even though it's going to contain a variable. So we want to scale this text and use fonts or font and a color to it. So I'm going to, with the label selected, I'm actually going to call this label coins. Okay, and I'm going to put coins with a capital C. You'll see why a little bit later so we don't get confused. So this coins label, we're going to give it a custom font again. I'm going to make a new dynamic font resource. I'll click on it, open up the font subcategory, and I'll drag in that Balsamic Sans font, and I'll go to the font settings, and I'll change the size to, maybe something like 60, and I'll drag that up, and I'm going to see if I can match the color of the X font. So I'll click on it. In fact, with a color picker, you can copy this hex value, which is, in my case, FFCC1D. A hex value is base 16. It's a number that most computer programs use to specify a color in the 8-bit color space. In most programs, that's what you're using. So if I go to this label, I can not use the outline color. I'm going to use the font color, and I'll enable it, and I'll paste in that FFCC1D color, and I will press enter, and now it is that color. Okay, I might make that font a little bit bigger, maybe 70 or so, and I will make it so that it is aligned. And where is that alignment? That's right under the top properties of this node. I'm going to say v-align center, and align left. So if I make this bigger, it will stay centered up and down because I have a line, v-align center, and I'll put it right about there. Okay, so now if I zoom out, let's see how that looks. And you know what I'm going to do? Of course, I'm going to save, and I'm going to press the play scene button, and we'll see if this works. I've got my coin counter up here. I think it's too big, but I'll fix that after this video. But now if I go and, of course, walk around my level and make the camera move to follow me, it is staying on my screen quite nicely. To make it actually display the number of coins that we have collected, there are a few steps here. First of all, I'm going to go down to my HUD. This is my branch in my main level 1 scene. And with the HUD selected, which is of course a canvas item, I'm going to press the add script to it. So I'll have it selected. I'll press add script. This is going to add a new GD script file, of course. It'll be called hud.gd. I like that. The template I'm going to use is going to be no comments. This is cleaner than just leaving the default because it puts a bunch of comments into your code. So I don't want that. So I'll say no comments and I'll press create. It'll be called hud.gd. Now, when the HUD first loads in the game, we want the HUD to not have its coins label, say, or have those two visual pound signs or hashtags in there. We want to, right when the game first loads, change those to a number value. So that is actually a good use for this function called _ready that we haven't talked about yet in this tutorial series so far. This ready function that we've always just deleted is actually a function that runs whenever a node first launches into our game, and when the node itself is actually ready to start running code, well, this ready function automatically runs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, go get your coins child node and access its text property and make its text equal to 0. How do we do this? Well, to access another node in your scene, especially a child node from a node that you are working on, you put, of course, instead of this pass line, we'll get rid of that. I'm going to say you put a $sign. And when you put a $sign, this is how you access child nodes again, and you can just put the name of it. So in this case, I'm going to say coins, and this coins has a capital C, which matches this one. And now that I have that, if I put a dot, this is how I can access any of the properties of the coins object or any of its methods. In this case, a label has, and if I actually click on the coins label, it has a property called text. And we can actually access this using code from the HUD object. So I'm going to go back to my HUD script, and I'm going to say coins dot, and it's text, just like that, T-E-X-T. It's lowercase, even though it was uppercase in the inspector. So now I can say, hey, make this text equal to, and I'm just going to put something silly at first. I'm going to say, make it equal to Bob. Except when you assign a piece of text to the coins text, you have to put it in quotes. So I'm going to put in quotes Bob, and then I'll do a quick Control S to save, and I'm on my level 1 scene now. So if I press the play scene button, well, it says Bob. Okay, how do we make it say a number? Well, it's not quite as easy as just putting a 0 here, because when you type a number 0, Godot will recognize that as an integer. An integer is a whole number that does not have decimals in it. And those two types of numbers that are integers that don't have decimals and numbers that do have decimals, are a little bit different in most programming languages. So if I try to run this, if I press play scene, I will get an error. And what my error says in the debugger, because it just crashed essentially, is invalid set index text on base label with value of type int. And int here means integer. So what this not so easy to understand error says is that we're trying to assign a number into a text property that's expecting a string. And a string is a piece of text with letters and characters, but a string always has quotes like that. Now, this doesn't work for us though, because we want to actually be able to count with this number. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to run or call a function that's built into GDScript called string. And this string method will convert what you give it. It's a method call, so you need round brackets. Whatever you put of different types of data in the round brackets will get converted into a string. So now we're converting the number integer 0 into a string just so that a text will accept it and be happy with it and understand what to put in its text label. Okay, so I'll press Control Save or Control S on my screen. I'm going to press the stop button. It might not let me save until I press stop, and I'll press play scene. And now it says 0 on my screen. But just having the number 0 isn't going to be enough. We want to keep track of our coins with a variable. So I'm going to keep track of, on my HUD now, the number of coins that we have collected in our game so far using a variable. So above my ready function, I'm going to type var, and I'm going to use the word coins, and I'm using coins with a lowercase now, just so we don't confuse it with our coins label. That's why I did that. So var coins, I'm going to make it equal to 0. And whenever we collect a coin, we're going to add 1 to that number. And you'll see that you've already seen something very, very similar in the last video. Okay, so now instead of just saying convert the literal value 0 into a string and put it in text, we're going to convert this coins variable and put it into the text as a string. So I'm going to say coins in there. So now if I do a Control S to save, it's coins, not just coin. If I do a Control S to save and I press play scene, now it should say 0. If I make coins equal to 6 and I do a Control S to save and I press the play scene button, it'll put 6 in there. So I'll close that and I'll change this back to 0. Okay, following me so far, but we don't really have anything functioning yet in terms of our HUD. It's not actually going to count anything yet. If I go back to my 2D workspace and I press play, well, it just displays this 0 on the screen, and it's not going to change if I'm counting my coins. My coins are making my character still count. Okay, so if I collect, I believe it is 3 coins, then I'm going to reset my game and nothing is happening here. What I need to do is change the way my coins are communicating with the rest of my scene so that my character is no longer the object that's collecting coins or counting coins in the background. It's going to be my actual HUD. And the HUD itself, even though the HUD is not a visible object, is just the kind of container, the root of the rest of the things that you see in the HUD. This HUD has my script on it. It's going to be the object that actually does the counting, the logic, and it has a script on it, and it has the coins variable, so that makes sense. If I select one of my coin nodes over in the scene dock and look at its script, so I'll actually open up its scene. I'll click on a little scene icon on any of my coins. We're opening up now, we're in our coin scene, the original scene that we were instancing, and I go to the coin script. You can see that it has a function called onCoinBodyEntered, which is linked up to a signal that detects if a physics body enters it. That's why it's called onCoinBodyEntered. And when it detects Steve or any physics body that can be detected by it, enter it, it's going to play the bounce animation and it's going to access that physics body that collided with it, and it's going to run a method in it or a function in it called addCoin. This addCoin method and the body, well, this is referring to, of course, our character, and our character has an addCoin method on it, but we're not going to use this anymore. So I'm going to get rid of this line of code. It's gone. So now what's going to happen is when our character enters the coin, well, the coin is going to still detect that. Like if I select my coin and I go to my node dock, it still has the body entered signal that is still running the onCoinBodyEntered function. So now if I go back to my script, yes, it is still connected. It still will work. It'll play the bounce animation. And when the bounce animation finishes, it will run this function, which makes the coin disappear. But right here, we need to send a signal to our HUD that a coin has been collected. And this time we are going to have to use a signal, but there is no signal built into an area 2D. So if I select the root node, which is an area 2D, and I go back to my node dock and look at all the signals, there really is no signal for this specific instance. These signals that come with any given object are common things or events that could occur for that kind of object, but this requires a custom signal. So on my coin, I'm going to go to the coin script. Above any of the other functions, but below the top line, I'm going to create a new custom signal. So I'm going to type signal. This is just like making a variable, and I'm going to call this coin underscore collected with an E and an ED. Okay, so spelled correctly. And I'm going to, when a physics body enters this coin, when this function runs and the animation player plays its bounce animation, I'm now going to emit that signal. So I'm going to press enter, and lined up with the previous line of code, right indented under this function, of course, I'm going to say emit underscore signal. This is how you emit a custom signal, or really any signal. This is a method call, so I need to put my parentheses or round brackets, and in here I'm going to put in double quotes coin collected, the same name of my custom signal. So coin underscore collected, spelled correctly, hopefully. Okay. But on its own, a custom signal like this doesn't do anything, of course, unless you connect the signal up to a method or function that you have somewhere else in your program, or perhaps on this code itself. In this case, I'm going to emit a signal that's going to be connected up to my HUD's script, and my HUD script will have a method on it or a function on it that will run whenever the signal is emitted, and it responds to it, and it will add 1 to the coin variable, and it will be responsible for keeping track of how many coins are collected. How do you do this? Well, I'm going to save this coin scene and its script, so I'll press Control S, I'll go back to level 1, and I'll go back to my 2D workspace. And if I select any of my coins now, coin 1 is good, so I'll select coin 1, you'll see that under the node doc, there is a new custom signal here. It's the one that I just made, called coin collected. And it's not hooked up to anything. It doesn't have one of these little green icons below it. So what we're going to do here is, in the actual scene, on this coin 1 instance of the coin scene, I'm going to hook the signal up to something else in this scene. We can't do this step, at least as far as I know, at least as far as we're going to get in this mini-series, on the original coin scene, which would be nice, because this coin scene doesn't know what else is in the scene that it's being put into, that it's being instanced into. So we can't really assume that there is going to be a HUD in our scene where the coin is. So that's why we have to do this on the instance, or each instance of the coin. So I'm going to select coin 1, and now that it has a signal, I'm going to have, or a custom signal, I'm going to double click on it. And now in the scene where this instance of the coin is, I'm going to select the node that I want to put the code on for this signal. In this case, I'm going to select, of course, the HUD, because that's what it's going to send the message to. So I'll select the HUD. It has a script on it. I'll press connect in just a second, but it's going to make a receiver method or a function called onCoin1 coin collected. That's too long, and it doesn't work for all of our coins because it says coin 1. So I'm going to get rid of coin 1 and just say on, and I'll get rid of a couple of, or the extra underscores there. This method or function is going to be called just underscore on coin collected. And I think that's short and more to the point. So I'll press connect. And now if I look at my HUD's script, which is what this is, there is a new function here called on coin collected. And this function, of course, will run whenever a coin is collected. And what I'm going to do here is say, make coins equal to itself plus 1. You saw this in the last video. So I'm going to say coins is going to be equal to coins plus 1. And that's how you write the code to make a variable add 1 to itself and then store that itself plus 1 back into itself. Okay, it's kind of a weird way of saying, hey, add 1 to that variable, but that's how you do it. But as it stands, even though our variable is being updated here, we are counting the coin properly, it's not going to show up in that label that we have on the screen called coins with a capital C. So if I were to play this right now, I'll do a Control S to save, and I'm on level 1 now. I'll press play scene. It is kind of working here. I have it displaying 0, which is my coins variable. And if I go and collect a coin, especially that coin 1, it did send that signal. It did actually count to 1, hopefully, but it didn't change because we haven't changed this label yet. To do that, well, it's actually the same as this line of code here, but I don't want to be redundant here. So I'm just going to call this ready method again, or this ready function again. So under this line, I'm going to press enter. I'm going to call underscore ready again. And yes, you can do that, ready. There we go. Yes, you can call that method, even though it's not going to be running it, or you're calling it that's the time that's not at the beginning of your game. That's just fine. So I'll do a Control S to save, and let's see if this works. If I press play scene with level 1 selected, it should display 0. And now when I collect a coin, it changes to 1. Good. Okay, let's go and see if this keeps on working. If I go and collect the second coin, nothing happens. Because with that second coin and my third coin, we didn't hook up the signals yet. So if I go back to my 2D workspace, if I select coin 1, this coin collected signal is hooked up to our HUD's on coin collected signal, but coin 2 isn't, coin 3 isn't. So this is where you're gonna have to bite the bullet here. You'll either, if you already have tons of coins and you already have them laid out exactly where you want, you'll need to go to each coin and double click on coin collected, and then you need to make sure that you're hooking it up to the same signal or the same function, pardon me, that you were before. So it has to be the exact same name on coin collected, just like that. Instead, I would recommend that you just set it up working on one coin. So in this case, coin 1, I'm going to select coin 2 and get rid of it. Right click, delete nodes. Yes, please. And coin 3. And delete nodes. And while we're here, why don't we actually lay out our coins using some snapping and a grid? Recall from a previous video where we set up our, I think it was the one-way platforms, that there is snapping and a grid in Godot. You can snap to a grid, and our grid is set to 32 by 32. If you click on these 3 little arrows, you can say configure snap. Yeah, these 3 little arrows is actually a little menu. And I'm going to change grid step to 64 and 64 pixels, and I'll press close. So now if I drag this coin around, it'll snap nicely, and that will make it so that my coins are all nicely aligned, and so they're not all wonky. Also, I might want to put all of my coins in sort of their own branch, in kind of like a folder in our node tree. So I'm going to select my root node here, and I'm going to press plus. I'm going to add just a node 2D, and this is just going to act like a folder. So if I double click on node 2D or search for it and then add it, I'll double click. This is going to be like a folder for all my coins. So I'm going to name this coins, and I'll press enter. I'll drag my coin into that, and I'll select it, and it is all the same that I'm expecting. And I can now go ahead and of course move it to wherever I want. I'll put it maybe right about there or so. And now I can just right click on it in my node tree, and I can say duplicate, and now it'll name the next number nicely. So now if I drag it up, it'll go there. And if I right click and duplicate again, it's all set up, and I can just drag this one over. And if I select any one of them and go over to my node dock, you can see the signals are all working. So now if I press play scene, hopefully now I'm starting off with my HUD counter at 0, and I can collect 1, 2, and 3 coins, but we haven't won the game yet. We haven't switched scenes. So for that, this is going to be exactly the same as with our character. In fact, on my character, I'll go select my Steve node and go to his script. I have the code that we need. We have inside of our physics process delta function, we have this if coins equals 3, change my scene. I will zoom out on that so you can see all of it in Godot. So right there, I'm actually going to cut that, Control X on my keyboard, because that's not going to be on our character anymore. In fact, we don't need this function add coin anymore, so we'll get rid of that as well. And now let's go to our HUD. So I'll go to my HUD and my HUD script. We need to add that physics process delta game loop to our HUD. So I'm going to go above my last function. That's generally where it goes. Func underscore physics process delta. It's built into Godot, so it'll know what to type. And I'll press enter, and now I'll paste that if statement. So now if my coins variable, which is named the same as I had it before, is equal to 3, hey, I'll switch back to level 1. If you need to pause the video and get that code for yourself, please pause the video, but I'm going to press Control S on my keyboard, and I'll go back to my 2D workspace, and I will press play scene, and now my game loads. And if I collect 3 coins, hopefully I win the game and my game resets. Okay, We are almost done, but there is a logical problem with our game, and I'll illustrate that right now. If I press play scene and I go and collect a coin, and this problem was brought up to me in my last mini-series in Godot, in my 3D basic game. If you collect a coin, and then as the coin is doing its little animation and you go out of the coins area and then back into the coins area, you can actually collect the same coin twice. Thank you to that commenter who let me know that. So the same thing, the same logical error is happening here. If I go into my coin and quickly go back out of it, it didn't happen there. But let's see what happened. Oh, it actually did happen just there because I collected just 2 coins and it reset my level. If I do that, what just happened? Well, I went back and forth and I have 2 coins. What's happening there is, of course, when I go up and collect a coin, I am entering an area. And when I enter an area, it emits a signal to go and collect and runs some code to add 1 to our coin variable on the HUD. And if you go out and then quickly back into that area as the coin is playing that animation, you are triggering that same code twice, and you are therefore adding 2 to that variable instead of just 1. How can we fix this problem? There are a few different ways we can do this, but the easiest way is if I go to my coin scene and I go to my coins code. Of course, we have a function here called onCoinBodyEntered, and this is of course the function that gets run whenever your player enters the coin. When that happens, of course, we're running a animation or playing an animation called bounce to make the coin go up and down, and we're emitting a signal called coin collected so that we actually count the coin. But when that happens, we want to disable the coin's ability to be able to detect any more players entering it. So what we're going to be doing here is we're actually going to play and edit in the game our collision mask of our coin. So if I go back to our 2D workspace in our coin scene, if I select the root node of my scene, of course, over in the inspector and the properties, we have a collision section, and our coin object, the area 2D, doesn't actually belong to a layer. Now we have a layer for items in our game. If I click on this little 2 dots here, we have, I believe it's the 4th layer for items, but we don't actually put the coin on a layer because we don't need the player to be able to detect coins. We just need the coin or all the coin instances to be able to detect players. And that happens, of course, using collision masks down here. If I click these 2 little dots, you can see that the coin is able to detect players. And so this first layer, this first little box is enabled. What I'm going to do in my code is disable this right after a player enters the coin, okay, or the instance of the coin. How do I do that? Well, if I hover over this little square, you can see that this layer, it says bit 0 and value 1. And so I'm going to use a method call in my code of my coin to turn that off, to set the value of this square, this layer, to false. We're going to turn it off. So I'll go back to my coins script, and right here, when we're entering the coin with the character, I'm going to call a method called set underscore collision, and it's called set collision mask bit. So I'm going to use my down arrow key on my keyboard, select that second option, press enter. Now, as you can see, because it's kind of prompting us here, it needs 2 values. It needs a bit value, in other words, which bit of all those little squares, which layer are we targeting, and what value are we going to give that bit? Are we going to turn that bit on or off? So if I go back to my coins properties and go to the mask bit, you can see that it is bit 0. And it has a value of true right now. So it's the bit value that we're looking at, not the value. Okay, so if I go back to my coin script and I say 0 for bit 0, and then I'll put a comma, and now it's looking for a Boolean value, which basically means just true or false. In this case, I'm going to say false. So now I've turned the collision mask off. So hopefully that should work. I'm going to do a Control S to save. If you need to pause the video, go ahead and do that now, but I'm going to go back to my level 1 scene, and I'll go to my 2D workspace and I'll press the play scene button. Let's go ahead and try this out. If I go over with my character and try to collect my coin twice, it just doesn't happen. Okay, I was a little bit slow there. Let's go ahead and try that one more time. I'll go and collect my coin twice, and I can't collect it twice anymore. So that has worked, okay? So that will be it for this video. We've solved quite a few problems here, and we've added a HUD in this video. Of course, if you like this video, if you learned something in it, please go ahead and click on that like button below this video. It really helps out me and my channel, and I really appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this one in the Godot game engine or in Blender or other technology, click on that subscribe button as well, and click the bell icon to be notified whenever I upload a new tutorial. Check out my Facebook page and my Instagram page. In those two places, I post sneak peeks and previews of what I'm working on next. But that'll be it for this video. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.